Welcome to the podcast where sustainability gets real. I'm Alan Stenson, I'm your host, and in each episode we uncover the people, ideas and actions driving the journey to net zero. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Emission Possible, the podcast where we explore real stories, real solutions on the road to net zero. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a friend of mine who I'm in huge admiration of. This is someone who is quite literally redefining what waste really means. Michael Amos is the managing director of Waste a Wonder, an organisation that's quite literally diverted thousands of tons of redundant furniture and equipment from landfill, transforming it transforming it into classrooms, into libraries, and creating opportunity all around the world. We'll be talking about how circular thinking can deliver both environmental and social impact. Why redistribution should be as natural as recycling, and what business can do to make their sustainability strategies truly powerful. Michael, thank you very much and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Excellent. Well, we're going to jump straight into it. For those who may not know, it would be great if you could maybe give us a quick overview of what Waste a Wonder is and how it all came about.
Yeah, I think we exist to address a challenge like most organisations do. The challenge that we exist to solve is that every year $100 billion worth of new office furniture and hospitality furniture is procured each year. Most of that, 98% at some point is going to end up in the waste stream. Very little of it currently goes for reuse. And each year of that $100 billion worth of new furniture that's procured, so that's millions of tons of office furniture is manufactured each year. Every year, 7 to 15% of that reaches the end of its corporate life. So if you imagine that in real terms, that is a vast amount of equipment that every year is either being sent to landfill or incinerated or recycled, which obviously is better than the other two, but still misses the opportunity to support disadvantaged communities and people in need. So we were set up originally as a waste minimization strategy. There was a view that myself and my father-in-law, who's my co-founder, that this stuff was way too good to just chuck away. Surely someone can use it. So it was more of a waste minimization program rather than a social impact strategy. There was that we hadn't gone that far down the path. It was literally too good to chuck away. Let's find a new home for it. Our very first main project or large project was for British Petroleum BP. They had 800 seating positions. It was a commercially tendered project, and the approach that we took, which was a differentiator between us and the other traditional logistics companies who were bidding for that work. Back then, almost everything went to landfill and a little bit went to recycling. So our view was, well, we'll donate as much as we can and recycle everything else, so zero to landfill. They kind of called our bluff and awarded us this project. So it was 40 container loads worth of desks and chairs and beds and cupboards. Wow. And we donated a lot locally. So we rang around local schools and charities trying to find a home for furniture. But it was slow going. It was 10 chairs, 5 cupboards. As you can imagine, local schools and charities don't want 800 of anything. We were then, through luck, divine intervention, call it what you will, introduced to the head of education at the University of Marrakesh in Morocco. And he was addressing an issue that young women, for cultural reasons and religious reasons, couldn't travel unaccompanied. So if their community didn't have a secondary school, when they reached the age of menses, 12, 13 years of age, if they didn't have a male relative, they basically couldn't travel, so their education would stop. So what he was doing was identifying underutilized government buildings, converting them into secondary schools in these more rural communities. And we were introduced to him. We said we've got, at that time, 17 container loads worth of furniture and equipment that we still had to find a home for. And the King of Morocco actually funded the shipping costs to get those to what became the first 17 schools in our School in a Box program, which has now expanded to support over 1,500 schools in 47 countries.
Wow. That's absolutely fascinating, and I love the story. Like it puts it all into perspective as to why you do what you do. Just tell us a bit more about the School in a Box program, because you've hit some serious numbers on that now.
Yeah, a 40-foot container. So it's a high cube 40-foot shipping container, and each container contains roughly 16 to 18 tons of office furniture. So we like to describe ourselves as world-class Tetris players when it comes to furniture. We don't ship air. Every square foot of that container is filled with equipment. It really existed to do two things. We still support local schools and charities in a big way. 50% of the furniture we clear is donated domestically, locally to where the projects are taking place. We work in concentric rings, so we look for local schools and charities first, then regional, and then international, the School in a Box program. It addresses extreme poverty in developing regions, and B, becomes a fantastic overflow for larger projects with a large volume. So that means that our reuse rates, on average, we achieve over 97% actual charitable reuse on every project because of that international reach. Obviously, extreme poverty is a global issue. We are barely scratching the surface in terms of the demand. We're probably, just in terms of our own existing recipient partnerships that we've developed, we're at about 20%. By that I mean we could take 5 times more than we're currently receiving and still not hit sort of a buffer or a roadblock in terms of the demand. And I think what we've learnt, and this was again an extension from it being a waste minimisation program to being something more special, the social impact element of what we're about, is the ripple effects. Obviously, education is the best route out of extreme poverty, and that's been backed up and proven by research, certainly over the last 50 years in the developing world. But it's more than just a desk and a chair in a school in Africa, in Ghana or Cameroon. We're funding solar powered bore wells because we identified that one of the barriers to education was lack of safe drinking water. So in communities that maybe had a school but their village didn't have a bore well, the priority for the family was to send their kids 4 or 5 miles a day to access a neighbouring village who had a well, to bring water back to drink, to cook with, to wash with, and to grow some meagre crops. So that their priority wasn't education. So by putting bore wells into some of these communities, suddenly a lot of those initial, literally life and death challenges are abated, which means young people can now attend school. The ripple effects, again, from an education perspective, there's a lot of data that shows that the longer a young person stays in education, and the better the quality of the education, the better the life chances are for that young person and obviously for their wider community, which then ripples onto the modern slavery piece. So 2 of the biggest risk factors for people being trafficked is extreme poverty. So there's obviously that need, but also lack of education. And what we've learned is that the tricks that modern slavers and the traffickers use is to target these young people in these vulnerable communities. As I say, the ripple effect of even our awareness of the impact of what we do in the School in a Box program continues to grow and inspire us to do even more. And of course, that's tied neatly with the waste minimisation piece, because every new recipient that we can support from a social impact perspective is making use of equipment that might otherwise have gone to waste.
Yeah, which, it's fascinating because that whole mindset shift, I can see how that mindset shift worked for you in terms of you quickly realised that this was an opportunity that you could then really deliver far more and be a force for good through the solution that you're providing. But how are you seeing that mindset shift for the wider market, your clients, are they starting to realise that redundant assets can be a resource, not a liability? I mean, is that still something you're having to educate a lot more on, or are people realising actually we can really do some positive work here by utilising this solution?
I think the rise of ESG as an extension from corporate social responsibility is going some way to address that. Obviously, a lot of organizations now have a social impact procurement strategy. So it's not just about the environment, the EBIT. There's a lot more emphasis on the SBIT. And that carries through to a whole raft of products and services that companies are buying from their suppliers. I think what organizations, certainly leading organizations, are starting to realize is the symbiotic nature between protecting the planet, being more sustainable, and how that affects the people around us, the communities that we live and work in, and further afield. So all of this is interconnected, and I think a lot of organisations are starting to understand that. And then of course it's also linked to things like business risk, which was again part of the reason why ESG exists as a strategy. It was really a measure originally in terms of financial risk and reward for investment. So I think when companies are intelligently looking at the way their business operates, the materials that it uses, and the impact that it's having on the humans involved directly or indirectly with the way that organization does business. It's those organizations that are taking it seriously and are doing a bit of a deep dive, are seeing the best impact across the board, really.
Yeah, and I think what you guys do really supports that process. I mean, yes, it's a business risk, it's a financial risk, it's an environmental risk, it's a social risk, but I think your solution really helps that circular economy actually work in practice. And I mean, I know you've been very keen on understanding the link of how reuse and redistribution literally complement recycling and carbon reduction, and you're quantifying by how much, and that's incredibly useful, valuable information for anyone that's understanding what the impact of their decisions actually is. So yeah, I mean, what you guys do, what's been your approach in terms of that and delivering that as a value add?
Yeah, I think going to the circular economy piece, I've got a couple of issues with the circular economy being the be-all and end-all. The first is that circular economies focus on the stuff. So how stuff is sourced or mined, how stuff is manufactured, how stuff is used, and how stuff is disposed of. I've been sort of working on this concept of a spherical economy, which it looks more holistically the humanist approach. So it more focuses on the who. They're intertwined, but if you use that analogy, the spherical economy would look at, in terms of materials acquisition, the people that are involved, who's actually doing the mining, the living conditions that they're in. From a manufacturing point of view, things like fair trade comes into it, and paying a fair price for materials, so you're not driving communities into extreme poverty. From a use perspective, in the built environment, obviously we work closely with the facilities management sector. It's everything from mindfulness and understanding the physical disabilities potentially of employees. Biophilia falls into this, and those sorts of things. And then from an end of life perspective, of course, our take is that these items or these assets can deliver a huge amount of social good before they then become materials again. The other challenge that I have with circular economies, again, it starts at the point of where the materials are turned into that first item. And it's more focusing on what's going to happen to those raw materials to get back into being manufactured into something else. And I think true circular economy needs to sit at obviously procurement in terms of the design of those items, so which materials are used. Repairability falls into this category as well, so you can extend the life of a product. And then obviously from an end of life point of view, I would like to see circular economy baked into procurement, which focuses or allows for ethical reuse as a given before something then gets recycled or sort of energy from waste or whatever. So I think building in that social awareness of the life cycle of a product alongside the environmental and materials process, I think is something that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, I mean, what's been the challenges for you in providing that insight? So like from an operational side of things, integrating reuse into office moves, into refurbishment, into the defits. I mean, is that something that you're seeing becoming more of a requirement because people are needing to understand, what's driving the impact of when they commission a service or when they buy products and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of points of instigation as to why an organisation may have the requirement for waste to wonder. Companies that are growing typically take bigger spaces, or they're acquiring other businesses and they want to bring those teams into the corporate headquarters, so the sites that those teams have been working in become no longer needed. It's also tax efficient, if you're doing quite well and your organisation is making a lot of money, to buy new items because you get written down allowances and things like that. So there's a tax benefit to procuring new. Flip side, as organisations face financial pressures and global economic concerns cause organisations to maybe downsize or sort of shrink their property portfolios. COVID obviously was a huge instigator of this because 50% of the staff had no intention of working back in the office again. So again, there was a vast amount of furniture and equipment that overnight became redundant from a corporate perspective. But I think our single biggest challenge is still awareness. Like there's still an assumption for a lot of organizations that if we no longer need something, it must be waste. How do I ethically dispose of it? So how do I sustainably dispose of it? It's only when they engage with Waste to Wonder or an organization like Waste to Wonder that does prioritize reuse and demonstrates that there is a reuse path for this, and then can illustrate and educate what all of those downstream benefits are going to be, that they then realize, oh, actually, I didn't even realize that my furniture or equipment could find a new second life supporting these people. At that point, it becomes a no-brainer, and we obviously, part of the reason we have some amazing corporate clients we've worked with now for almost 2 decades is because they stumbled across us 20 years ago. But I mean, at trade shows and events that I speak at, over the 23 years, every single time someone says, I wish I'd known about you 6 months ago, we chucked everything into skips, or we had a logistics company take it all away, but they recycled everything. And then obviously once they've engaged with us and they've seen the impact and the benefit of doing it this way, they typically come back to us for every future project. So I always say it's cyclical. So you're always going to buy new furniture.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's part of the relevance of what you're doing, because, and obviously one of the reasons why we started to work is that carbon link. it's not just punching in numbers or filling out a report. It's what does this look like in terms of our net zero journey? Like when I'm making these decisions, is that helping or hindering my journey to net zero? And it's that level of understanding that people are now they're looking for, because they're sitting there looking at their carbon footprint and thinking, well, all these things that we're doing is generating impact, and what can I do to find a better way of doing this? I think that's why one of the reasons that we were so pleased to be working with you guys is that that you're providing people with the insight and the understanding to know exactly what the impact of their choices are. This is a way to make a better decision, and this is the value that it's bringing for you. So you're quite literally helping to support your customers' journey to their ESG targets and their net zero journey by fulfilling a positive impact in all of those areas. And I think that's been really key. But I know you guys have been really keen to start to go into the detail and demonstrate what it actually means when somebody repurposes their redundant furniture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we like to say that people unknowingly sat on carbon savings. It's funny, we've been reporting on the embedded carbon of the items that we redistribute since 2010. So we're quite early adopters of understanding that this stuff has a carbon there's a carbon benefit to reuse over recycling. I remember having a meeting with a big facilities management company, or the head of what was CSR for this big facilities management company years ago. It must have been around 2010, 2011. And he was working on a project at the time measuring the carbon savings that they'd achieved by stopping the use of polystyrene packaging in the cafeterias of the buildings that they operated, and he got some impressive figures as part of that initiative. But on a single clearance project that we did for them, that was like 20 times the carbon savings of the stopping of using polystyrene packaging in the cafeteria. And it was that sort of element there of, oh blimey, I've been spending literally at that point 6 months. He'd been going around all the sites, getting them to provide all their calculations and data and all this sort of stuff. And he did the same actually with car sharing. He was trying to map all of and all of this is important, by the way.
Yeah.
You have to make improvements across all levels, but the amount of effort that he was putting in to track, the carbon saved through carpooling and things like that. And again, they were being dwarfed by reusing furniture that historically they just chucked away. So that was quite an interesting approach as well.
Oh, it's so common. We often talk to businesses that are saying, "Oh, we've got a paperless office, or we've got recycling bins in the common spaces." Fantastic things to do and should be being done, but it's probably 0.01% of your footprint, and it's not until the proof is put in front of them, like when you look at what is my footprint, where is it actually coming from, and then you can start to prioritize and understand what can be done, what can't be done right now, what plans do we have in place, and really quantifying the impact, which is really key in terms of what you guys do, because it's giving them that understanding. Like in that example, they simply didn't know that they could be doing something else that they could actually easily achieve, that would massively dwarf the carbon reduction of what they thought they should be doing, and often that's the case, and it permeates across all different aspects of businesses, that they don't realise where these emissions are coming from, and therefore that baselining of and that genuine insight in terms of what the footprint is so important. But yeah, it's key. I mean, maybe talk us through a little bit about how you demonstrate and add value to your clients through what you do with them, for them to actually start to use these numbers and use these achievements to demonstrate how they're progressing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is with carbon measurement, and obviously you know this very well, the measurement is a starting point, and that's when obviously you can build on that, make improvements on that. From our point of view, it was a waste avoidance, a waste minimization piece initially, and for every desk, chair, bed, cupboard that we redistribute is a desk, chair, bed, or cupboard that hasn't had to be manufactured to meet the recipient's needs. And I think we underestimated what that carbon, the positive carbon impact, was through the School in a Box program, and it's a piece of work we actually did with CBRE, who we both work with, and as part of one of their preferred suppliers and part of their social impact supply chain, we were one of the first cohort to basically undertake a carbon measurement initiative, an externally validated initiative, and that's really when we started working together. But we looked at School in a Box. We've always known the social impact value of the School in a Box program is profound. It's bringing education to disadvantaged communities in really difficult scenarios around the world. We always knew that the with our heart that reusing items is better than disposing of items or recycling items. But when we actually looked at the carbon reduction or the carbon savings through ethical reuse, every desk, chair, ped has a carbon cost to manufacture. The carbon cost to get it there, so we use London to Sierra Leone as an example, but actually sea freight's quite a carbon efficient way of moving things. Although the ships are diesel guzzling, whatever, they're carrying thousands of shipping containers, each containing tons and tons of equipment. So they are a relatively carbon efficient way of moving stuff, certainly better than air or rail or anything like that. And when we measured the carbon to get 16 to 18 tons of furniture from London to Sierra Leone, the carbon cost, and there's measurements that are provided by the shipping line. So for every kilogram per kilometre travelled, they have a measurement for that. And it's about 2 tonne of carbon to get a container load worth of furniture from London to Sierra Leone. But the carbon savings to preventing 16 tonnes of furniture being manufactured are roughly 45 tonnes of carbon. So every school in a box we send generates a huge amount of carbon savings. And when we then went through the actual formal initial assessment with yourselves, it actually demonstrated that our carbon savings were roughly 6 times our carbon cost, and hence the platinum certification, because I think at the time you had to gold, which was sort of carbon neutral, but our whole model actually generates significant carbon savings for ourselves and our clients.
Yeah, which is incredibly valuable because most businesses now are coming to the realization that the vast majority of their footprint is outside of their control. So if 80% of my footprint sat there in the supply chain, for instance, or based on the business decisions that we make, that we can't control the production of those decisions, how are we going to get to net zero? So identifying where those savings can come from and how they will specifically benefit each customer on a customer by customer basis is positioning you as such a value add. It's such a support partner, because that's something that they can't do unless you do it for them. So it makes complete business sense, and everyone involved is benefiting from that. So, and I think that's really the way that sustainability needs to be addressed, because if you're integrating it into the solution and everyone benefits from being a part of that, then that's ultimately always going to be so much more successful, because it isn't just an add-on or an extra cost or just another thing that we've got to do. It's just how we operate, and it's making sure that we're operating with the lowest possible impact. So it's been fascinating working with you guys on that and helping that. But I think one thing that you're very good at, and perhaps you can go into a bit more detail around the whole storytelling side of things, because I think you can come up with a number. I can tell you that the internet has a annual carbon footprint of 1.6 billion tonnes, and you go, oh, that's a big number. What does that really mean? And it could be the same as you and me flying first class around the world 30 million times. Suddenly it's like, oh, okay, yeah, then that is a lot, and you can understand it. But how has that formed part of how you guys have operated in terms of storytelling to turn data into inspiration and helping to connect sustainability goals to human outcomes?
Yeah, and I think that's literally the key, is the humanization of the data. Data is wonderful, but it depends on your perspective. We've got some fantastic big stats. We've equipped, as I say, over 1,500 schools in 47 countries. We've positively impacted 1.5 million young people's lives through the School in a Box program. We've donated over 1 million office furniture items to good causes. But then you flip that, and I go back to what I said at the beginning: $100 billion, so millions of tons of furniture, and we're redistributing 2,500 tons a year. So although we're the biggest in terms of ethical reuse across Europe, we're still a tiny drop in the ocean in terms of the scale of the problem. So again, from one perspective, 2,500 tons, that's a lot. Millions of tons. So we're a tiny blip. That's true of carbon as well. And I think when you're talking about tipping points and things like that, it's about incremental improvements. So if every organization is 10% better than they were last year, or 5% better than they were last year, and individually, if we're 5% or 10% more sustainably aware and trying to make changes within our homes and the way that we operate our businesses, then collectively, cumulatively, that's where the impact comes. We went through a bit of an epiphany in terms of the storytelling. We've been exceptionally proud of the programs and the numbers, but actually when you drill down to the why, it's about the individuals that are being supported. So we use the example of that young person who I happened to spot walking past the school in the Gambia during school hours, and I asked the question of the head teacher, why are they not in school? And they said, because his village doesn't have water. And that instigated the Borewell project. One of the other stories aligned with the Borewell project, we met a gentleman called Keta. He drove us around the schools that we were visiting the first time we went out to the Gambia. And when we started the Borewell project, the charity that we support, the Global Orphan Empowerment Academy, said, we'd like to put a borewell into Keta's village. Would that be okay? And I said, yes, of course, that'd be wonderful. We went back out there a year later, had an amazing party at Keta's house with his entire family in the village, and the village elder and the local imam came and expressed their just joy, sheer joy. The Borewell, he's now growing crops. And he's feeding his family, and they're growing excess crops, so he can now send his kids to school. But the fundamental human story there was Keta's 67 years old, and for the first time in his life, he can turn on a tap and access safe drinking water that's not going to make him sick. So I think that's true of carbon as well, and of environmental performance. It's about humanizing it, both in terms of empowering people at an individual level to make changes within their organization. If you look at sort of organizational change, every person within an organization should be a champion for sustainability and for climate change. And also then from a procurement point of view, if you take it to the G bit, the governance, it should be board level. There should be board level responsibility for this, and not just someone he's got an extra couple of words to his business title. Take responsibility, build teams, educate the teams about climate change, about carbon, about the baseline. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? Set those targets, set those ambitious targets, because an ambitious target not hit is you're still a lot further along than when you started from. But I think that humanizing it so that every person can be part of the solution.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it is the key to achieving success on this journey, because I think there is an ever growing will to do the right thing, and when people are actively and proactively looking at the steps that they can take and wanting to understand the impact of the decisions that they make. And you're right, it has to form part of the fabric of the business. It has to be part of, this is how we work, this is how we operate. It's not just we're doing something to tick a box. We're doing something because that's how we work. When you work with us, that's the benefit you get, and every business could be doing that. And when you're providing that level of support, that's going to be good for business. And a good, strong, commercially successful business is potentially a more sustainable one. It can be making lots of money, but if you're not doing that environmentally or socially responsibly, that's not sustainable. But in the flip side, you have to make money because you could be the greenest company in the world, but if you're not making money, that's also not sustainable. So the whole thing has to be factored in. I think that's where we're starting to see some of this shift. It's realizing that we need to future-proof our businesses, and this is a way to do that.
I had a brilliant visit at one of the factories that Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific Partners operates. So the Coca-Cola fridges that you have in service stations and corner shops and things, everything from the little round Coke can, plastic lid on the top sort of thing, through to the full dispensing machines and things like that. they are owned by Coca-Cola, and they're basically sort of provided as part of the commercial arrangement with the retailers. But those fridges used to have a lifespan of about 7 to 10 years. They're now 15 years because they bring them back in, they give them a full service, and obviously they have to, from a brand perspective, they need to look shiny and new when they're put back out into retail spaces. Historically, they used to sandblast them, so which uses a ton of water. Ton of water in that process. What they've done now is, which I think is just amazing, is they've created basically a booth, and what they do is they actually, instead of sandblasting using water and sand, which is single use and then it leaves, they use frozen carbon dioxide pellets, which they fire out of like a spray gun at a really high pressure, which acts like like sandblasting, so it takes all the old paint off. But then when that room gets put to room temperature, the carbon dioxide turns into carbon dioxide gas, which gets extracted, refrozen, turned back into pellets. So that it's a zero water system now. Wow. I actually met them between the first and second lockdown, and they were saying the average lifespan now for most of their fridges is about 15 years. So they've gone to zero water and they've effectively doubled the lifespan of this. So they've made tactical decisions, but of course it's saving the money as well, because their water cost and everything else, and of course the cost of a fridge. They've effectively doubled the lifespan of that. So they've effectively halved the manufacturing cost for those units.
It's a great example. Michael, give us a flavour of what's coming next for Waste to Wonder. I know you've got some fantastic things in the pipeline, so maybe this is a good opportunity to let us know what the next steps are.
The next chapter, thank you, Alan. So our next, again, ripple effect, our next genesis of the School in a Box program is our Sustainability Cookery School program. I visited a big technical college, so it's a 2,000 student technical college in the Gambia a couple of years ago, and they had a building that was 80% completed, but the funds had run out. So my original thought was, let's get some fundraising, let's complete the building. And where we do the large-scale clearances, we're quite often pulling out commercial kitchens. So I thought, great, well, we could actually create like a culinary college within this, or culinary classroom within this college. The feedback that we had from the charity that we support is that because it's a government-owned school, there are some risks associated with putting a lot of value into government schools, because if there's a change in election, there's the risk that things can change, and there is elements of corruption that need to be considered. So what we've done instead is last year we fundraised and bought a plot of land. So we have a 99-year lease. We're actually going to build a sustainability cookery school from scratch, which we're actively fundraising for at the moment. The idea behind the school is to take all the stuff that we've done with the education through the School in a Box program, the borewell project, and the fact that a lot of these communities, we've now done 27 borewells, so about 60,000 people have access to safe drinking water. A lot of these communities are now growing excess crops for the first time. And so the plan was, okay, we'll buy those excess crops at a fair rate from these communities, and we will help provide vocational training in hospitality for young people. So we're planning 140 students a year through that program. We've got a fantastic culinary partner, Chef Connor Spacey, who's an amazing award-winning chef focusing on food waste and food sovereignty and food sustainability. So he's come on board to help us set the curriculum up. But it's going to be a really exciting next step. And the plan ultimately is this first one that we're doing in the Gambia will be the first of many. And ideally, we'd like to have a sustainability cookery school in every School in a Box recipient country. So that's the long-term strategy. But for now, we're fundraising to build the first. We're 60% of the fundraising target, which is amazing. So we're actively fundraising at the moment. So if you wouldn't mind sharing the Just Giving link as well, that would be fantastic.
100%. I was going to say, let's get that link in the comments. Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. And we'll share more about that as it progresses, but that's going to be a really exciting sort of next step for Waste to Wonder.
Yeah, I love that. That's excellent. It's been so good to have you on the podcast. What's a good way of people finding you and and understanding more about what you guys do?
Yeah, so obviously www.waste2wonder.com is the website. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well, and Instagram. Waste to Wonder have a page and we share good news stories. But I think, yeah, obviously we've got tons and tons of filmed case studies demonstrating the social impact of the programs that we run. So first port of call would be to, jump on the website and have a look. And of course, if you've got a clearance project, we'd love to hear from you and demonstrate the wonderful social impact that your redundant assets can deliver for communities in need around the world. So yes, that would be an exciting next step for your listeners to take part in this ongoing 23+ year journey. But there's an awful lot more to do.
Yeah, fab. Well, we'll make sure the links are in the comments below. And once again, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. But thanks for being on the podcast, and we'll catch up again soon.
A pleasure. Cheers. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks for listening to Emission Possible. If today's episode sparked an idea or presented a challenge, please reach out and let us know. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned, because net zero is absolutely possible.